This is the location of the former concentration camp at Sachsenburg, and in this series of videos I'm looking at the commandants of the camp. This was one of the very first camps, and it's important as being the camp where many future SS criminals learned the ropes, which is why I think it's worth looking at the future careers of those commandants. All future camps were to a large extent based on what the SS learned here, not least because the camp also had a training facility for the SS. Possibly because the camp was closed so early and was then used for industrial purposes, a great deal of it has survived. It's located on the river Zschopau to the northeast of Chemnitz. On a rocky outcrop above the camp is Sachsenburg Castle, which dominates the skyline. The video you can see here of the area was taken in autumn, in the second week of November. However, do not be fooled by how attractive the location looks today. During National Socialist times, it was a place of terror for those German people who opposed the Third Reich. Walter Gerlach was born on the 25th of August 1896 in Gussow, a town which is today in the Märkische Oderland district of Brandenburg and almost on the Polish border. Of course, in 1896 it was nowhere near any of Germany's borders. After graduating from school, Gerlach completed a one-year course at a construction trade school where he learned how to be a bricklayer. When World War I broke out, Gerlach was not quite 18 and he volunteered immediately. He went through the entire war without getting seriously injured and was discharged from the army in 1919. He looked back on his time in the army with fondness and spoke of the comradeship he experienced there. Together with his two brothers, Gerlach took over his father's wood products factory and became sole manager in 1927. However, the difficulties during the Great Depression led to increasing indebtedness, which in turn led to insurance fraud for which he was fined. In 1930, the business collapsed. It probably goes without saying that he blamed Jewish business owners for this failure, accusing them of having driven his company into the ground. Unemployed and probably very bitter at the turn of events, on the 1st of September 1930, Gerlach joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, membership number 307120. In February 1931, he joined the SS, SS number 14567. From August 1932, Gerlach became leader of the 27th SS Standarte in Frankfurt on Oder. He appears to have enjoyed the violence associated with being part of the National Socialist Party. He would organize attacks on his political opponents and was considered a hothead even by his superiors because of his extreme use of violence, which they urged him to turn down. Christian Weber was an early member of the National Socialist Party. In fact, he joined the party when it was still called the German Workers' Party. He would have been in the party for about as long as Hitler. He ran a fuel station and the manager was Joseph Dietrich, later become famous as the person responsible for the Malmedy massacre of American prisoners of war during the Battle of the Bulge. Dietrich was also very close to Hitler and was also good friends with Walter Gerlach. Thus Dietrich, by now an SS-Oberführer, was able to get Gerlach transferred to the Gestapo, a role normally given to career civil servants or police officers. This was, and is, a common form of corruption, not just of the National Socialists, whereby party workers are rewarded with jobs paid for by the taxpayer, irrespective if they are capable of doing it or not. As a result, Gerlach was put in charge of the Columbia House prison here in Berlin as from the 1st of August 1934. He brought with him as his adjutant Arthur Liebehenschel, who had already served under his command in this capacity in the 27th SS Standarte and who arrived on the 4th of August 1934. Liebehenschel would later become the Commandant at Auschwitz and Majdanek. On the 30th of November 1934, the Columbia House prison was reclassified as a concentration camp. As of the following day, Gerlach was moved to be in charge at Sachsenburg. Whereas Gerlach was noted for the use of violence on the prisoners at Columbia House, at Sachsenburg the accounts left by the former prisoners do not talk of him in this way. Gerlach did not stay very long at Sachsenburg. He made the mistake of being rude to Martin Mutschmann, who was the Gauleiter of Saxony. Mutschmann's office had asked Gerlach for information about the treatment of pastors in the Sachsenburg concentration camp. Gerlach did not know that it was Martin Mutschmann himself on the phone. Martin Mutschmann had been a member of the National Socialist Party since 1922. By 1935 he was Prime Minister of Saxony, the party Gauleiter of Saxony, and the Reich Governor of Saxony. So therefore one could probably argue that he was quite important in Saxony. Mutschmann had taken an interest in the case of Ernst Lehnick. Lehnick had been a pastor at the Evangelical Lutheran parish of St. Nikolai in Leipzig. His father, the goldsmith Josef Lehnick, was Jewish. Therefore, Ernst Lehnick was considered a half-Jew or non-Aryan during the Nazi regime. Whilst a student at the University of Heidelberg, World War I had started and he had volunteered. In May 1915 he was seriously wounded and suffered a lifelong stiffening of his left shoulder joint. This injury earned him a certificate that he was unfit for field service and was thus able to continue his theological studies at the University of Leipzig. Ernst Lehnick was a member of both the Confessing Church and the Pastors' Emergency League, which was founded by a theologian Martin Niemöller. On the 31st of March 1935, Pastor Lehnick was taken into custody after a church service in Leipzig. The reason for this imprisonment was the reading of a forbidden pulpit announcement. 2.5 weeks later, on the 18th of April 1935, he was transferred to the Sachsenburg concentration camp. Mutschmann called Gerlach about Lehnick. However, Gerlach, possibly not realizing who he was talking to, was rude to Mutschmann. This was not a good career move, and on the 20th of April 1935, Gerlach was sacked as Commandant of Sachsenburg. After Sachsenburg, Gerlach then became adjutant to Camp Commandant Heinrich Deubel in the Dachau concentration camp. Deubel was replaced as Camp Commandant by Hans Loritz in April 1936. Loritz and Gerlach did not get on, and Gerlach asked to be transferred to the General SS. In July 1935, Gerlach was involved in a street altercation and as a result was sentenced to 2 months in prison by a Munich district court. This, in theory, should have seen him released from the SS also. However, Heinrich Himmler intervened on his behalf and the sentence was commuted to a suspended sentence to almost 3 years, and Gerlach remained in the SS. If Gerlach had not been so well connected in the Nazi establishment elite, then another fate could have become him, such as being sent to Dachau himself. From the end of 1938, Gerlach led the SS Section 7 in Königsberg, and from 1942 he was employed by the Reich Commissioner for the Strengthening of German Nationality. From 1944, Gerlach headed the office of the higher SS and police leader Gunther Panke in Denmark. Gerlach was arrested on the 30th of May 1945 and interned until 1948. On the 14th of November 1947, Gerlach was interrogated by US intelligence officers to see if he had any information that might be of use in the Nuremberg trials which were then underway. It would seem that he did not. Eventually he was freed. Upon release, no one took any interest in Gerlach. There appears to have been no investigations into his crimes whilst he was in the SS. His protege Aber Liebehenschel was not so lucky. After Sachsenburg, he was posted to Lichtenberg concentration camp, and on the 5th of July 1937, he moved to Berlin as department head of staff of the leader of the SS Death's Heads units, that is to say, Theodor Eicke, where he headed the political department at the Inspectorate of the concentration camps in this building at Sachsenhausen until May 1940. On the 11th of May 1943, he became commandant at Auschwitz, and in the following year he was moved to Majdanek. He was arrested in Italy after the war by the Americans and extradited to Poland. He was tried at the first Auschwitz trial in Krakow in 1947, found guilty and hanged. At the beginning of the war, Martin Mutschmann was appointed Reich Defense Commissioner to add to his many other titles. One of his responsibilities was the construction of air raid shelters. He successfully managed to build his own bunker at his home in Dresden, but neglected to build shelters for the general population. He therefore bears a great deal of responsibility for the up to 25,000 dead in the air raids of the 13th and 14th of February 1945. As the Red Army approached in April 1945, he called for the fight to continue to the end. Mutschmann punished all violations of this rule with death as treason. Dozens of such death sentences have been documented in Saxony. It will therefore come as no surprise to anyone that he did what most of those who sentenced others to death for alleged treason did. He ran away. On the 16th of May 1945, he reached Tellerhäuser, where he found shelter in the house of a coal merchant. That evening, the mayor of Oberwiesenthal, Hermann Klopfer of the SPD, who had only recently taken office, received a call from the nearby settlement of Tellerhäuser. Mutschmann was hiding there. Police and volunteers surrounded the house. Mutschmann was arrested along with other Nazi officials. The next day he was pilloried on the main square in Annaberg, and the KPD mayor Max Schmidt accompanied this with a speech celebrating his arrest. He was taken via Chemnitz to the Lubyanka prison in Moscow. On the 30th of January 1947, a military court sentenced him to death by firing squad, which was carried out on the 14th of February 1947. Josef Levick was released from Sachsenburg on the 26th of May 1935 after more than a month in the concentration camp. He was suspended from church duty several times and spent more time in prison for resistance work. However, he survived the war. He was not rehabilitated in church circles, and he was not reinstated as a pastor. From 1945 onwards, he concentrated on political work, for example, with the founding of the CDU political party in Saxony and as a member of the Saxon State Parliament from 1945 to 1952. He died on the 8th of November 1953. Walter Gerlach survived all three of them. He died on the 19th of April 1964 in Haiger Hesse, it would seem completely forgotten. As always, I like to suggest that people actually visit the places I'm talking about. Indeed, I see what I do as tourism in some way. At Sachsenburg, there's plans to start the museum and to make it much more documented for visitors. But for the moment, there's a really good display here showing original photographs with explanations. At the moment, okay, it's all in German, but you will find as you go outside that there are English translations for everything as well, explaining indeed how the growth of these concentration camps, which we can see here on this map, we've got Prussia in white, rest of Germany grey and darker grey foreign countries. You will notice that they're concentrated in Saxony and in Prussia, and there are of course very clear reasons for that. So we do have photographs, and indeed this is Sachsenburg, despite the fact there's very little known about it. This is not because of a lack of documentary evidence. For once, it's awaiting work to be actually done. If there's any one lesson that one can take from a place like this, it is that it's the terror of the dictatorship which allowed this to happen. And I think, if anything, something like this is to remind us of what can happen. So, for the moment from me, I hope you found that interesting. I upload every Tuesday and every Friday at 2000 hours my time. I live in Poland, and in Germany, and so you get lots of material like this, original material, but at the same time you will find out what these locations look like today. So thanks for watching, and all the best from me in Sachsenburg.